We're going to talk about the one topic that I have been personally living for the past 5 months, 6 months since I've joined Stripe, which is hiring for talent, not your traditional pre-sales profile, especially for us that are in hyper growth and trying to build teams quickly and trying to hire people that are going to be perfect. I would love to understand today, and we have an amazing panel to help me understand that. How do you hire for that talent? So, Amin, are you on?
Hi there.
Hi, I'm going to hand it off to you. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Perfect. Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Amin Ibrahim. I hail from Vancouver, up in Canada. I'm the Senior Director of Value and Solutions over at Hootsuite. And this is something that's very close to my heart, something that we've been able to be very successful with. And it's just amazing how we can build people's careers who don't necessarily come from that traditional profile. I'm looking forward to telling you more about that.
Awesome, Amin. And Julia, would love for you to introduce yourself and also tell us a little bit about what this topic means to you.
Yeah, happy to do that. So hi, folks. My name is Julia Welch. I'm a manager of solutions engineering here at Aqua, located in the Boston, Massachusetts area. This topic is very near and dear to my heart because I run our talent incubator, which is our associate solutions engineering program. So you could say that I'm pretty much always hiring the non-traditional profile.
Talent incubator. I cannot wait to hear more about that, Julia. I know we're going to chat about that in a bit. And Brendan.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Brendan Sapience, based out of New York. I am the Director for Sales Engineering at Instabase for North America. This topic is near and dear to my heart because there's no, probably like many people here, there's no greater satisfaction to hire someone and then look back with that person a year after they're in-house and look at all the things they've achieved and how much they've achieved past the point that they thought they could do, really. So I'm always very keen on hearing people's experience and learning on that topic as well as sharing my observations.
Well, welcome, Brendan, and welcome to everyone. And quick introduction for myself, for those of you that joined us right now. I head the Enterprise Solutions Architecture team at Stripe. And as mentioned, we're in hypergrowth. So really looking to understand anything I can from this wonderful panel that we have today on tips and tricks for hiring quickly and for talent that may not be the traditional pre-sales profile. So maybe we can get started with a question that comes up a lot, which is, we all have a success formula. We all know what we've hired once, it's worked, and it's so easy to just find the exact same person, the exact same profile, and keep hiring them because, hey, it worked once, it's going to work 10 more times, and then you have the perfect team. But from experience, that's probably not the right formula for success, I can tell. But would love to see, Amin, from you maybe, what is the most extreme hiring profile that you've hired for and actually had success with? And also maybe if you can touch on, why did you decide to take a risk on them?
Yeah, no, it sounds great. So if I think about the most extreme one, and this is a really fun one. This is actually a person that I hired this year. And this individual, she's actually a country singer. So she's a country singer. Her day job at the time was in recruiting, and her passion is country music. She records music videos, all sorts of great stuff. She's got a background in performing arts, and based on the type of SC that we needed and the fact that we can train a lot of those skills, she's become a huge success. Every time people attend her meetings, they come away thinking like, man, that was really fun. So the customer experience she's providing is amazing. She needs to learn a bit of technology. She needs to learn a bit of how to simplify a few things, but marrying that with her natural ability to tell great stories and get people really excited has been hugely successful. So it wasn't actually much of a risk because I had a really strong feeling about this individual. And you're talking earlier about what happens. You get your perfect profile, and then you hire 10 of those people. You hit diminishing returns so fast. Right? Once you've got a few people who do the same thing and are great at the same thing, going outside of that profile really adds so much more to that team. So I'm a firm believer in that.
Awesome. And as much as we say that an SC is, on your own, kind of doing your own thing with your users and trying to get success, it's really at the end of the day a team sport and a team that makes you successful. So I love that, a country music singer. Julia, what about you? What's the most interesting profile that you've taken a risk on, and why?
Yeah, so with the Associate Solutions Engineering program, for a little bit of context, we typically take folks that have 0 to 3 years of experience and who we deem as high potential for being successful as solutions engineers. And historically, one of the key things that we looked for in the hiring process was a computer science degree, right? Do they have foundational kind of technical expertise that we can build off of? Last year, we had a candidate who applied to the program, and they had solutions engineering experience in a non-relevant industry. It was in restaurant point of sale technology, but they didn't have a computer science degree. We still decided to take a chance on this person, though, because when I interviewed them, they had such a presence on the line. They asked these really thoughtful questions and kind of inspired us to start thinking about soft skills in addition to that foundational technical expertise that we look for. When we got to the final interview for this person, they had this uncanny ability to own the room. They were engaging. They treated their demo like a story and not a technical training. They asked these really thoughtful, open-ended questions. And we brought this person aboard. And while we took a risk on them for not having that kind of foundational technical expertise, they've been one of our most successful hires. They graduated the program 3 months early. Funnily enough, they're now a product champ or subject matter expert for one of our most technical products. And they've actually already met their annual quota this year in their first quota carrying year. So this really inspired us to evaluate or reevaluate how we approach screening candidates and prioritize soft skills and technical curiosity over a checkbox, if you will, for an academic degree.
That's so great to hear. And Julia, how big was your team when you started the advocate program? Like, how big was the entire global SE team?
Around 30 global SEs at that time.
Awesome. So moving on to you, Brendan, curious to hear your experience on hiring and not a regular profile SE and getting success with that.
Nothing as exotic as a country singer, but working up to that at some point when we're a little bit bigger as an organization. A few years ago, I did hire for a very technical role for very technical products, a person with a background in consulting. And I remember still the interview deep dive we did together. He asked me about a third into the interview, I've never scripted in my life. I've never coded in my life. Is this going to be a problem because it's a technical job? And I told him, not necessarily. It really depends on you. Because as you guys pointed out, right, some of those skills you can teach. What he did have, though, is this honesty of saying in an interview, I might not have the skills for this job, just so you know. So the honesty and the fact that he had really good command of the room in every single interview it was with, right? He had that presence and the emotional intelligence to take down people's sort of natural defenses and create bonds very, very quickly. And that's much harder to teach than Python scripting, for instance. So we took a chance on him. And a year after he started building AI models in Python on his own, and didn't realize that he had grown to the point that he became actually a very technical person because he had all of the sort of unteachable skills on one hand and everything else we could coach him on. And so while he didn't have any of that technical background, he very much quickly ramped up on that and became one of the best sales engineers that we've ever hired for that team.
Excellent. There's a theme that I am sensing here. It's taking a chance on someone that has the skills that, to own the room and some of the skills of curiosity and things that really make our top SEs shine. So that's great to hear. I've had similar experiences taking chances on people. In fact, picking someone all the way from India because we felt like as a team, like this is our next SE, and maybe waiting 6 months till they could arrive, but now being in a position where we couldn't excel at our business like we were if we didn't take a chance on that person. So that's fantastic to hear. Now, of course, we spoke about the good experiences. Let's talk a little bit about the not so good ones, especially with the traditional profiles. So we all have, we put out our job postings, we have all the requirements that we need for an SA, SE, and we interview for that. Now, there are some candidates that look great on paper and they interview really well, and it's almost like you're not taking a chance on them. This person's the profile that you've always hired for. but in certain situations, we've been proven wrong. So curious on the experience where that did not work out so well. Bren, if you can start with that.
Yeah, and let me reassure everyone here. I think we all have in our surroundings people that we think are great at identifying talent and really picking people in what the best is in people. It doesn't matter if you just started hiring people or you're 10 years in, you will still make mistakes. And I think we all have made mistakes, but it's the best way really to learn what some of those red flags are. I think my biggest one a few years ago was an SE we hired. And he operated really well for the first 3 months. And on a customer call, after 3 months, he sort of disappeared. Claimed that he had a problem with his laptop. In the middle of the call, we tried to call him. He picked up the phone once, and then we never heard from him again. And so what we found out later is that while he was going through onboarding, he had actually never resigned from his previous job and thought that his previous job was fairly light in terms of workload because a big organization, he'd been there for quite a while. And after the onboarding period was over, it became a little bit too much for him to handle 2 jobs, obviously. So he essentially ghosted us, which felt very strange as a manager because you don't get sort of that closure of the ending of that relationship in essence, right? So it was a very interesting experience. And in retrospect, there were some red flags that we could have identified from the start, but didn't necessarily put a lot of emphasis in because we were growing very fast. And as you're growing fast, you sometimes tend to take some shortcuts because they're convenient or you just don't have the bandwidth. So it was a good reminder that while someone comes from a very traditional sales engineering profile and background, there's still quite a lot of analysis that needs to go into the person to really make sure that they will be a proper fit for the team. That was a really good experience in terms of what I learned.
Julia, do you agree with Brendan?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we've run into challenges in the past where somebody looked great on paper. I just talked about a hire that didn't have a computer science degree. Historically, I can think of one hire where we really prioritized technical skills, right? We made it clear in the interview process that it's really critical for somebody to have some of those foundational technical skills. And what we've actually found in some candidates is if we rely too heavily on what they look like on paper, we oftentimes have a miss in some of the other critical traits for success in the role. Namely, for one person, this was technical curiosity. So this individual did great in the interview process. They passed their technical screen with another solutions engineer. They had a computer science degree from a top university, right? So on paper, they looked really great. But once we brought them aboard, we found shortly after they joined the program that there was really a lack of love for learning and a lack of technical curiosity. So they didn't want to tinker. They didn't want to peel back the layers of the onion. And I think we all know that those are some critical foundational traits in being successful solutions engineers or pre-sales engineers. So ultimately, this person was not successful in the program, but we learned to really not take how somebody looks on paper at face value and instead, focus on curiosity as opposed to whether or not they check the box.
That's interesting. And I do want to learn a little bit more about that. How do you evaluate for that? But before that, Amin, could you tell us any experience with hiring someone who looked great on paper but did not work out so great?
You bet. And I got to say before I do, man, having somebody ghost you, that's wild, man. That's an experience for sure. So in my situation, I had this one experience where, again, the person looked amazing on paper, all the technical skills that we needed. And it just goes to show why it's just so important for us to become really crystal clear about what we need from these individuals and what we need to provide to customers. So this guy was very technically strong and he spoke really well to a certain target audience. And we're like, okay, great. So speaks really well to this great target audience. I'm sure he'll speak great to other audiences as well. Didn't happen. He had a lot of trouble going beyond talking to other people that were also very technically advanced. And so he had a lot of trouble simplifying things. He had a lot of trouble connecting with executive leadership. And it was, unfortunately, he never got there. But yeah, that's my story. It's a fun one.
Wow. Simplifying all the things that I'm hearing here, curiosity, I think those are some of the skills that are important to look for and not always easy to evaluate for. So Julia, coming back to you, maybe, can you help me understand and everyone here understand, or give us tips and tricks? How do you evaluate for those? They call them soft skills. I prefer functional skills and someone in pre-sales needs. And how do you, what does your interview process look like? What are the questions you ask? How does it all come together?
Yeah. How do we find these pre-sales unicorns? Because I think at the end of the day, that's really what pre-sales engineers are. We have to have this uncanny balance between, maintaining a room and maintaining credibility with a technical audience, but also have the ability to have high emotional intelligence, have great presentation skills, tell a story, ask questions, right? Do really great discovery. The list goes on and on as to why soft skills are important. Now, I'm hiring for folks who are early in their career typically. And so I can't ask some of those typical soft skills questions that we might ask of a solutions engineering candidate, right? How do you prepare a storyboard for a demo? How do you approach your demos? Tell me about how you typically do discovery with a prospective customer as you're getting to know them. One of the soft skills that I look for actually has nothing to do with pre-sales, and it's coachability. So coachability is really critical for the associate solutions engineering program. They need to be able to take feedback and apply it to their development, right? So in the initial interview, I'll typically ask questions around how they take feedback, how they've worked with managers in the past. But the key thing that I've implemented in about the last year or so was a dry run before the final interview. So we give the prompt for the final interview, and then a few days before they come in, we do a dry run together, and it allows me to see their raw talent first and foremost, but it also allows me to give them feedback and coaching. And then in the final interview, I can evaluate how they've incorporated that feedback in their demonstration. And that's really been a great indicator for how they respond to coaching after they join the program. So, my kind of feedback to folks is you're thinking about soft skills, think outside the box of what we typically think of soft skills for solutions engineers. So things like storytelling and asking questions and owning the audience, but more so, thinking about development for these individuals as well.
That's great. And Julia, you spoke a little bit about the junior talent that you're hiring. One of the questions from our audience here is around starting this talent at a salary band or compensation that's usually lower. And then, as they progress in their career, how do you retain that talent when they suddenly look outside and they see that they are worth a lot more than how they've progressed at where they were? So any tips and tricks? And this is a question from Toby in our audience.
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it's something that we've been challenged by in the past, and we've tried to address over the last couple of years. So from a compensation standpoint, one of the things that we've implemented is adjustments to their salary based on whether or not they're meeting milestones in their onboarding. So the program is 12 to 18 months in length or so. So typically around the 6 to 9 month mark, we have a formal process of evaluating the progress that they've made. And if they've made appropriate progress, then we'll adjust their salary to be commensurate with that. Typically, that allows us to not have such a high bump to get them up to that solutions engineering role, and puts them kind of where the industry is expecting folks of their tenure to be from a compensation standpoint. I'll also add that, compensation is just a component of why individuals stay at organizations. Running a talent incubator like our Associate Solutions Engineering program, one of the other things that we focus on is development and culture as well. And so, making sure that folks feel like they have a good understanding of what is their career trajectory, what is their 2 to 5 year growth plan within the organization. And in addition to that, how are they valued as an individual within the culture? We find that coupling both of those with a strong compensation plan helps us to retain talent. And in the 4 years that we've had folks going through the Associate Solutions Engineering program here at Aqua, we've retained all talent. So everybody that's gone through the program is still here at Aqua.
100% retention. All right, we got to set up a one-on-one and chat a little bit more about that. But in the meantime, Brendan, can you tell us a little bit about?
Sorry, one quick thing on that question as well. So I love that answer, and I love the 100% retention. But one thing we've done here as well, we also added another step between associate and where they want to go, because some people really like the title as well. So like a senior associate, because some people are money motivated, some people are title motivated, and the plan is that keeps them in the organization long enough to get to the next level. So that's something else that could be useful too.
That's such a good point. It's not just, I think both of you made that really well, which is it's not just about the compensation, right? It's about the career path that you have and the different, some people just like different titles sometimes. So thanks for that. Brendan, what are your thoughts and how do you vet for, and in fact, our audience wants to know, how do you vet for curiosity, if you can touch on that, but in general on functional skills?
Yeah, Julia, you covered a lot of very good topics, I think, and I don't really have any sort of thing to add to that, right? I think the non-negotiable traits we always look for are intelligence. Emotional intelligence is something that we cannot miss. Coachability is super important. Honesty, optimism, resilience. I think I would add to that. I think resilience goes more maybe with smaller organizations that operate as startups. When you have an environment that's a little bit more chaotic than a large organization, resilience plays a role. I don't necessarily think that a lot of those skills have to be related to a person's professional experience. One way of gauging someone's curiosity, or what you said, Julia, on coachability is perfect. That's exactly what we do, right? We give advice, we give some pushback on some stuff, leading to a final presentation, a final activity, and sort of assess how that feedback was taken into account. For emotional intelligence and curiosity, it's a little bit trickier to measure. One thing that works for me is to just get into casual conversations with people and ask them about their life stories. You can find out a lot from that, right? You can always pull on threads of what people have gone through in their lives. And by asking very open questions, you'll be able to gauge the depth of analysis of a person on experiences they've gone through in their lives. And that level, that depth of analysis that they have on themselves or their circumstances is usually a very good indicator of both emotional intelligence and their general curiosity to understand what's around them. Like if someone starts telling you about little factoids that are adjacent to what they're talking about, that's a very good indication that they're genuinely very intellectually curious. We could go into a rabbit hole of going for each of those attributes in a separate session, because there's a lot to say there, I think.
Yes, looks like we might need a follow-up to this one. James, UG, I hope you're making notes there. But Amin, maybe I can ask you a follow-up to that, which is, do you ask people to demo as well during the interview? And is it something that it's your product or something else?
Yeah, so we do ask people to demo during the interview, and we do ask them to demo our product. It's such a great way, as Julia mentioned, how do you find out if people are curious? How do you find out if they're coachable? And one of the things that I actually do on purpose is the instructions are vague-ish, and it leaves a lot up to them. And I am actually very curious who just takes the brief, does something, and comes back, and who asks questions and who tries to go outside the process. I'm always looking for people who like to break rules and want to stack the deck in their favor, because that's going to show up real well when they're working on deals with customers, and they're not just necessarily following whatever box we put them in. And that's a great way to see how creative people can be. And typically what we do is we don't necessarily do a dry run before the final presentation, but if we find the final presentation wasn't quite up to snuff, but we still see a lot of potential, we'll do another final presentation and see if they incorporated that. So I think it's crucial. We've weeded out so many potential bad hires by doing that process. There are so many people who look amazing on paper and they show up and they've got tons of experience and they demo the same way they demoed 20 years ago. And you're falling asleep 2 minutes into the demo. And it's worked out really well for us doing that process.
So Kevin, I'm going to assign you a task if you're on this call. Kevin is our PSC member, and he's organizing all of this stuff. So Kevin, shout out to you. But could you please maybe start a poll? I would love to hear how many people in this audience actually have their own demos versus, have the candidate demo something that they're more comfortable with.
Yeah.
But
and we're fortunate in that we can do that with our solution. I'm sure there's a lot of other companies out there where it's just not even an option.
Fair enough. Good point. In the 3 minutes that we have, I know we have a few more questions from the audience, but maybe we can wrap up with each of you. And Amin, since you're off mute, can you tell us, as we hire for these traditional, non-traditional profiles, as you look at enablement, what's the one tip that you would give leaders that are listening in today? Advice, it could be best practice, or anything that we should take away from this chat.
Yeah, so myself, I come from a non-traditional background, right? Like I'm a marketing and international business major. That was my education in school. And that's actually helped me quite a bit because it's given me something very, very different. And the tip I would give is when you hire for these non-traditional profiles, if you can build it into your processes and systems to paper over the weaknesses that other people have. So for example, if you require a whole lot of coding and there's somebody who's amazing at pitching to executives, so maybe somebody else can help them with that coding aspect, or you can have a specialized role that does that coding aspect. Once you start thinking in terms of how you can build a system that way, you can really start to bring in those different skills that you need so that you can connect with any type of customer that could be buying your product and convincing them in the right way and speaking their language.
That's amazing. I like thinking, again, going back to the team view, like instead of just having an individual view on what you want to hire for. Brandon, thoughts from you?
I've never actually had any sort of incubation program or anything like that, so I don't really have any advice on that. The only piece of guidance I would give is don't rush to hire people with a non-traditional background, especially when you work for a small organization, you're building a new team, and think of it in terms of what if you came in with a different background and you started a new job and a new career, but you are in a small organization where everyone's sort of running around trying to fight fires left and right. Then you wouldn't necessarily get the right amount of coaching you frankly deserve into evolving into that new career. And so as a hiring manager, you should think about whether you're going to be able to support the growth and coaching required for a person with a non-traditional background for them to unlock all of their potential. And if you don't do that, you're at risk of hiring people and then letting them down and then not unlocking their potential. And you're doing yourself a disservice and the team as well, because you're going to create a little bit of extra drag on that team and your attrition is going to go up. So don't rush. Make sure you have the support structure around you with your other SCs. Maybe it's a layer of very senior SCs you started with that can provide extra coaching to non-traditional profiles. I think that's important to remember.
I love the rush aspect. Like sometimes you're so worried that you're going to lose that rec. You want to hire the first person that kind of checks the boxes, but wait it out. I think it's so worth it finding the right candidate and gives you so much more productivity. Julia, maybe we can end on you with any final thoughts on best practices for the group here.
Yeah, I would say just don't be afraid to hire folks that are early in their career. I think, typically as we think about building solutions engineering or pre-sales teams, we typically look for folks that have industry expertise and technical background and a lot of those soft skills that we look for. But there's a lot of value in taking in folks who are early to this career. Not only are you generating a pipeline of talent, for when attrition inevitably happens in an organization, you're also bringing incredible diversity. We typically hover around 60% women or non-binary in terms of active participants and graduates. These are folks that tend to have a positive attitude. They don't have bad habits, and you can really build them from the ground up. So think about, ways that you can inject value in the organization outside of, typical talent generation pipeline, which we usually think of talent incubators in that way. There's such a success in the value of programs like this. And, we're seeing growth in it in 2022. So I'm really excited about that.
Ending on a note of diversity. Thanks so much, Julia. Thanks, Amin and Brendan, for joining us today. And seems like we're going to have a follow-up to this. But I am excited to hand this entire event off to Kelly from DocuSign, who's going to take us through the next couple hours. Thank you so much.